Well, technically, we already have talked a little bit of this fantastic language, and on my main channel, I actually did already make a few videos about this as well, and I will upload them on this channel as well, slightly modified though. But here, I will begin as well at the beginning of Middle Egyptian. So, before we begin our first lesson, again, let me give you a brief overview of Middle Egyptian, and thus also kind of an overview of this course, more or less. So, Middle Egyptian is also a morphologically rich but Afro-Asiatic language, in which aspect and verbal stem shape play a larger analytical role than simple absolute tense. And syntactic relations are signaled mainly by morphology, which means suffixes or particles, and what Egyptologists call noun states, and not by case endings. Now, quick to the grammatical categories. First, we have person. Here we have first, second, and third. As for the number, we have singular and dual and plural. The dual survives in morphology. As for the gender, we have masculine and feminine. Gender is lexical, and feminine often marked with a t at the end. And lastly, voice or valence. We have active versus various middle or resultative readings, as well as passive or impersonal senses are often expressed by participles or periphrastic constructions rather than a single productive synthetic passive paradigm. Now, the verbal system, the big picture. You see, Egyptian finite verbal morphology is traditionally analyzed as consisting of several distinct series, often labeled the suffix or suffixal or pronominal conjugation, the prefix conjugation, and the stative, plus non-finite forms, infinitives, verbal adjectives, or participles. These series encode combinations of person or number, a spectral contrast, which would be resultative versus ongoing, a relative tense or mood, and derivational voice or valency formation. Now, on to the core series. First, suffix conjugation, pronoun or suffix series. Here we have construction where pronominal suffixes are attached to the verb, and it marks person or number via suffixes and is commonly used to indicate perfective or resultant readings and certain past reference in narrative contexts. It is also the series used when the verb carries object or subject suffixes. Next, the prefix conjugation. This uses a set of pronominal or other prefixes, often analyzed as encoding imperfective or ongoing or even prospective aspectual nuances, such as present or habitual, or future-like readings in certain contexts. It contrasts functionally with the suffix conjugation in aspect and clause type distribution. Next, the stative or old perfective or result state. This is a distinct verbal morphology that expresses a resultant state, which is a state arising from a prior event. The stative can also show agreement in gender and number, so that it behaves in some respects like an adjectival or resultant form. It preserves an earlier perfective type and plays a special role in describing states. And lastly, the non-finite forms. here we have infinitives and verbal adjectives or principles. Those verbal adjectives agree in gender and number when they are used as an adjective. Participles and infinitives are widely used in periphrastic and circumstantial constructions. These forms are essential for periphrastic aspect, causation, and relativization. Now, here are some morphological mechanisms to note. First, suffix pronouns attach to verbs and to nouns and are crucial for marking objects or possessors. This is why the suffix conjugation is so named. And second, reduplication, stem alternation and affixation. So, different stems for perspective, aorist, and perfect meanings are common. Tense or aspect meaning often arises from stem alternation plus affixes, rather than from a single tense suffix. So, since this was quite a bit, here a practical functional summary when a form is being used. So, use suffix conjugation where pronominal suffixes occur, or where resultant or perfective meaning is required. So, narrative perfective past or resultant states in many contexts. Use prefix conjugation for ongoing or habitual or even prospective readings, such as present or imperfective-like functions, and in clause types that favor prefix forms. Use the dative to describe states resulting from prior events, adjectival or resultant usages. And lastly, use participles and infinitives for periphrastic tenses, attributive clauses, and circumstantial subordination. And next, the nominal system. First, the core morphology. We do have genders, masculine and feminine. Now, the feminine frequently is marked with a final t. Then, as for the numbers, we have singular, dual, and plural. But we do have no inflectional case system like in Indo-European languages. That is because grammatical relations are signaled primarily by word order, particles, and the state of a noun. Speaking of noun states, here we have absolute, construct, and pronominal, basically the key to declension in Egyptian. You see, Egyptologists and Afro-Asiaticists describe noun morphology in terms of states rather than grammatical cases. So, let's look at them. First, the absolute or free state, the citation or independent form of the noun, used when the noun is not syntactically dependent or possessed. Then the construct state, annexed or construct, a reduced or morphologically altered form used when the noun is immediately followed by a modifying noun, a genitival relationship, or in possessive constructions, functionally similar to a construct state in Semitic languages. And lastly, pronominal or possessive state. Those form that occur when possession is expressed by suffix pronouns. The noun is annexed to a suffix form. Possessive or pronominal marking normally triggers agreement in number and gender on the suffix. And here as well, a quick functional summary. Possession and genitival relations are typically expressed either by the construct state with the possessor following, so possessee plus possessor, or by using possessive suffixes, which would be pronominal state. This replaces an inflectional genitive case. And lastly, many adverbial or case-like meanings, such as instrument, location, or source, are encoded by prepositions or particles, by the state of the noun or by the verb's aspectual or valency marking, not by a dedicated set of case endings. Then shortly to the syntactic signposts. First, the word order. This was somewhat flexible, but pragmatically shaped. Morphology, also suffixes, noun state marking, and particles, determines grammatical roles more reliably than other. Then, periphrasis, which is auxiliary plus a participle, is used to express complex aspectual and voice meanings. And lastly, possessive or genitival patterns. Hat plus the modifier, in the construct state, is the canonical order for possessed nouns. And lastly, to the morphology. You see, like other Afro-Asiatic languages, Middle Egyptian builds many related words around a small set of consonants, consonantal roots, and then uses a range of surface devices, such as affixes, stem alternations, reduplication, suffix pronouns, and noun states, to produce verbs, nouns, and adjectival or resultant forms. Beginning with the consonantal roots. Egyptian roots are primarily consonantal. Most lexical calls are built on 2, 3, or sometimes even 4 consonant, so-called biliteral, triliteral, or quadriliteral. The triliteral pattern, which is with 3, is very common, but biliteral, which is with 2, roots are frequent too. So, from one root, a family of words is derived. Different morphological operations create verbs, nouns, adjectival or resultant stems, or even denominal verbs that share the same consonantal skeleton. Now on to the main morphological processes, basically how meaning is built. We have 4 points. First, affixation, which would be prefixes and suffixes. A very productive strategy. Person and number is often marked by suffix pronouns on verbs and nouns. Derivational prefixes or suffixes alter valency, which would be causative or denominative, and aspectual flavor. Second, stem alternation or internal alternations. Different stems, sometimes with vowel or epenthetic elements visible in later stages or reconstructible from Coptic, mark aspectual contrasts, for example, resultant versus imperfect, and tense-like distinctions, and these are not always visible in the written hieroglyphs, but are critical in grammatical analysis. Third, reduplication and other prosodic processes. Partial reduplication occurs in verbal morphology and historically has been a device for aspect or derivation. Its productivity changes across stages. And fourth, noun states and possession by suffixes. Instead of an Indo-European case system, Egyptian uses noun states, again absolute, construct, or pronominal, plus possessive suffixes, and these interact with root morphology to show possession, modification, and syntactic dependency. And to end this first lesson, let us just briefly talk about the writing. You see, hieroglyphic and cursive scripts normally do not record vowels, so the surface consonantal skeleton is what we reliably see. Reconstructions of vocalic patterns and many stem alternations, therefore, rely on comparative evidence, which would be Demotic, Coptic, and Afro-Asiatic typology. One might wonder if the reason for such a development of a writing system is caused by practicality. Anyway, there you have the reason for them not writing vowels. Yet, you might rightfully say, but there are words we know with vowels. Well, that is correct. But there's a little bit more behind. Let me explain. First, we need to understand that modern convention and lack of proper knowledge about the actual pronunciation play a huge role in that. Thus, saying the Egyptians did not write vowels down is not entirely right either. You see, in Middle Egyptian, there are a few vowel-like sounds as well. Also, something important to keep in mind. We do not 100% know what vowels they used most of the time. The ones that we do know are from ancient transcriptions, oftentimes from the Greeks. And modern reconstructions tend to include vowels for us to pronounce the words somehow, based on various different theories, ranging from relatives of that language or using later stages of the language, again, Demotic or Coptic, where there's more information about the pronunciation available. So, based on that, you could reasonably guess how the words were pronounced. Also, it does help quite a bit that the later stages were used for religious purposes as well. It is always great to find usage in religious contexts, because they usually preserve the language pretty well, giving us a way to look at them and explore them much better. So, let's look at one concrete example, Inpu, which is the original name of Anubis. Now, the U, the Aquantic, happens to have two readings. At the beginning, V. In the middle and at the end, U. Very rarely also O, yet I haven't found any example for this. But that would explain the U in Impu. But sometimes you see the name transcribed with a V at the end. It is still the same name. But the other aspect is a bit more tricky. Here we have semi-vowels, as you might have noticed. At the beginning of the name Inpu, we have a symbol like this. And this is actually a Y sound. So it would be Y, N, P, V. But that is not really pronounceable, is it? Anyway, since this video is already longer than I planned it to be, I will have the hieroglyphs in the next video.